We are live. Hello, ladies and gentlemen out there on the interwebs. My name is James Murua, and welcome to the James Murua Literary Livestream. I'll be your host today, and I'm really excited because this is the beginning, the first edition of the live stream, which is a podcast for 2021. Um, this live stream is done in partnership with the Frankfurter Buchmesse, which you see on the screen, with funding from the German Federal Foreign Office. Welcome, Karibu. I'm really excited today because our guest, we're going to be talking about writers in conflict. And I've got some of the best writers and people who would talk about this. We have Tsitsi Dangarembga, who is in Stellenbosch right now. She is Zimbabwean. We have Volya, who is in Munich. She is Belarusian. And Ralph is in Nuremberg, and he's German. And I'm going to start by asking them to introduce their work, the work that they've written. And I'm gonna go clockwise. I'm gonna start with you, Volya. Introduce us. Who are you? And tell us a little bit about your work.
Good evening. Thank you very much, dear James and dear Tsitsi and dear Ralph, and for this invitation as well to be part of this discussion. Yeah, my name is Volya Hapeva and I come from Minsk, Belarus. I was born there, but since October 2019, I'm on the way. Living in different countries, mostly Austria and Germany. I started my literary career, so to say, in 1999 when my first publication appeared in the literary magazine. I write in Belarusian and identify myself as a poet, but I also write prose, sometimes plays, sometimes books for kids. Also, I do translations, like literary translations, and professionally, or like by profession, I'm a linguist. So I graduated from linguistic universities, and languages are my passion, so to say. Yeah, so I live with them, by them, in them. Yeah, so far I have published 12 books in Belarusian, and in Germany there appeared in German, in translation, appeared 2 books recently, my poetry collection and my novel. And in English, I have a chapbook, which was published also just recently in London. Yeah, also poetry.
That's quite a body of work. Ralph, what about you? Are you similar with Volya?
Yes, I'm a historian, and I'm writing since 1994 books. I've written now about 40 books, mostly travel books, but also crime literature and non-fiction books. And I'm at the moment, since 3 years, I'm the vice president of the German PEN, and also the Writers in Prison officer for the German PEN. So that's the thing or a reason why I'm in here in this session today.
Okay, before we go to you, Titi, you're talking about travel books. So you write about traveling in Germany, or what kind of travel books are you writing?
There are travel books mostly about France and also England and also German regions and also Little Italy. So there are practical travel books. So it's a German publishing house called Michael Müller Verlag I mostly write for. It's something similar like perhaps Lonely Planet or something like that. So you have a lot also practical informations and about the hotels and restaurants and also about the sightseeing.
Okay. Thank you. That's a better, and at least you get a better idea of the work you've done. Titi, what about you? What is the work you've done?
Hi, yes, thank you. Thank you very much, James. Good evening, everybody. Yes, I experience myself as a storyteller because I work in several genres. I have written for the stage. I have written novels, most notably the Tambudzai trilogy, which consists of Nervous Conditions, the Book of Not, and This Mournable Body, which was shortlisted for the Booker Prize in 2020. I'm also a filmmaker by training, and I have written about 7 or 8 screenplays, the only one of which to be produced was a commission. So it wasn't my own passion story. So I'm still working on producing the other ones. I also do a lot of mentoring with young people, and especially women in the areas of creative writing and writing for the screen. And I have several film scripts in development with my mentees as well. But again, we're still looking for funds for some of the ones that have actually been completed.
Thank you so much for sharing. So we have a diverse group of people who are poetry, film, travel, prose, all combined. So I'm sure that we'll be excited to join you today. Um, Titi, you actually you were chosen as a pen writer. You got the PEN Award for Freedom of Expression for 2021. Would you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, James. I think the reason that I came to the attention of PEN, and Rolf will correct me if I'm wrong, is that last year I joined in a protest in Zimbabwe. That was in July. It was meant to be a big protest, but the government declared the protest illegal a few days before it was meant to take place on the 31st of July. And so most people who had said they had intended to participate decided not to. I really felt that was too much of an infringement on my rights. I was aware that I was not doing anything illegal by participating in a protest, since the right to protest and petition the government peacefully is enshrined in the Zimbabwean constitution. And so I went out anyway with a friend, and we were arrested while doing that. And I spent a night in jail, and the case is still pending. So I think that was the main reason why I came to the attention of PEN. But I was very happy to come to the attention of PEN in that way, because a lot of the work that I do in expressing my position publicly in the various fora that are available to me are about people's right to express, to contest ideas, and even the work that I do with young women, in a way, is about freedom of expression. Women claiming the right to talk about abuse that their bodies are subjected to, women who are subjected to abuse by state agents, for example, supporting women who do that in terms of social media presence. So I think there are various layers to fighting for and defending freedom of expression. And so I had hoped that PEN had seen the totality of it. My Tambudzai trilogy, the 3 novels, are also, in a way, talking about the right to be who you are and to have spaces opened for you without retribution when you occupy those spaces.
Thank you, Sisi. Thank you so much. Voldia, you also, could be considered somebody writing at risk, and you're in self-exile in Germany now. What is that about?
Yeah, I think nowadays most people in Belarus can say, and writers especially, or artists in broader sense, not only writers but also painters and musicians, so active people in art. I think most of them are at risk now. This is very sad story, because the protesters have started in August 2020 after the presidential elections, which were rigged, as most people think, and the international community support that. So people were protesting against this rigged elections, but the government was really behaving in a, I mean, undemocratic. It's not even the right word to say that, to describe their actions. It's really inhumane, and what they do to people, it's really terrible. Because now you can be prisoned for just putting out our national flag, historical flag, which is white, red, white. Official flag of Belarus at the moment is not that. It's red and green, which was adopted after the 1995, after the referendum. And if you're just like even wearing, some women were arrested because they were wearing dresses which were in the same colors, and this is, like ridiculous, yeah. And today again I've read some news, and I was shocked by this absurdity, or theater of absurdity, because I cannot call it any other way, and it really makes me angry, frustrated, terribly sad, and I really want to hope for the changes, because it cannot last like this for long, and me myself, I have left Belarus, first of all, not because of political reasons. I received a scholarship from Austria, City Reiter, for 1 year, and I was there. And in August, September, my scholarship was over, and I had to go to Minsk. But then the protest started, and it was not really unsafe for me to go back, because I'm also against the existing regime, and I don't support in politics, and so I was lucky to get the scholarships and support from Germany and from Austria, and at the moment I'm here.
Okay, before we go to Ralph, Titi, you're in Stellenbosch. Are you also away from your country because you are worried about something, or are you doing a project?
James, I'm in Stellenbosch because I have a fellowship at the Stellenbosch Institute for Advanced Study, and it's a 5-month fellowship. And really, it was a godsend when it came, because the situation for creators in Zimbabwe is very restricted and very repressive. Those people who are able to continue to create in Zimbabwe usually have ties to the state, because the state directs almost everything. It might be state money, or it might be international money, because the money that comes into the country to be distributed, even from international sources, has to be cleared by the government. And so for people who are really outside that system, it is extremely difficult. And then because of that repression, everybody gravitates towards the government position, or else they gravitate to certain, let's say, international positions. And in my opinion, this leaves a gap in the middle where we should be negotiating and inquiring and reflecting on the Zimbabwean condition and the Zimbabwean situation. Because if we are always following other people's agendas, be it a repressive, militarized party which has hijacked a state and a nation, or be it an international community that has its own agendas, we will never be able to stand up and say, look, this is who we are, and speak to everybody in a collaborative manner to create a stable and more prosperous Zimbabwe. So somebody like me really falls in the middle of any of the options. And so it is really very helpful for me when my work is recognized and I'm invited to fellowships like this one.
Thank you, Titi. Ralph, you noticed that the issues being raised here are about the states, with Belarus and Zimbabwe's states not doing their jobs and repressing creative writers or creatives generally. Is the same thing happening in Germany? Do we have a similar kind of environment, or everything is fine and German writers and other creatives are fine?
So I think compared to the situation of Zimbabwe or Belarus, everything is fine in Germany at the moment. It was different in former times, but at the moment there is perhaps a little in the internet kind of hate speech or something like that. We have it all over the world, but in totally the situation, I think, is fine.
Oh, okay. So if everything is fine, you have programs that you are running at the Penn in Germany. What are these programs and why do you need them?
Okay, perhaps I should tell you something about the Writers in Prison program of the International Penn first.
Yes.
So it started in the 1960s as a result of freedom of expression in a growing number of countries around the world to silence critical voices through the harassment and imprisonment of writers. And the committee works on behalf of all writers, but also publishers, editors, and journalists who are detained or otherwise persecuted for their opinions expressed in writing. And unfortunately, the number of countries where writers are threatened is not decreasing. Generally speaking, the freedom of expression is threatened. Writers and poets are also in danger. Beating China, Eritrea, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, Belarus, or Zimbabwe, as Titsi and Wola know. And so they have this committee, and we have in the national centers, we have about 140 member centers of the International Penn, and about 50 of them have also writers in prison committees. So we work in their own countries, so with contact to our own government, and so we try to send protest letters and appeals to the governments concerned and calling our own government to stand up for imprisoned writers worldwide. And we have a few possibilities to get the focus on these writers who are imprisoned or at risk. So one of the things, example, to make them a honorary member of a center. Honorary members of the German Penn Center are currently, for example, the imprisoned Turkish writer Ahmet Altan, the blogger, poet, and human rights defender Ahmed Mansour, who is imprisoned in the United Arab Emirates, or the Egyptian journalist Lina Atala. And we try, the International Writers in Prison Committees and the International Penn in London gathers information about these individual cases and seeking to attain confirmation through two independent sources. Sources that include press reports, reports from individual of the region in question, reports from other human rights groups, from Penn members themselves, prisoners' families, lawyers and friends, exile groups, and so on. And once a year, the International Penn Writers in Prison Committee in London publishes a country-by-country list of all cases Penn has involved in, during that period. And this list is updated daily. And there are also rapid action campaigns that are organized on behalf of colleagues whose life and health is in danger. Another focus is the Writers in Prison Day, which has taken place annually on the 15th November since 1980. Each year, the focus is on 5 different writers who are imprisoned or threatened. And the fact that all international Penn centers call for their release on this day creates a lot of media pressure, which has repeatedly been crowned with success. So that's the work of the Writers in Prison Committee.
Okay, that's a lot of work you're doing. If I want to be, if I'm in Kenya and I feel that I'm not I'm unsafe, or I'm not in, and I need help from these committees. How would somebody get a hold of you or hold of the organization so that they can champion my needs?
So it depends on. Sometimes the family or friends are writing to the International PEN and call for help for this writer. Sometimes there are people they write directly to the German PEN. So there are different ways that they get involved in this case, and so we can then engage us for this person.
Okay, so you can use your friends or family or via the internet. Okay. Volodya, I know that you're also part of the Belarusian PEN. Do you have similar programs?
What do you mean, similar problems?
No. Do you have similar programs?
Programs. Oh,
yes.
No. As far as I mean, we don't have division because our PEN is not that big, and sure, I mean the conditions in which it has to survive, so to say, are really, really unfavorable, and they try to do their best, and they write, and I know that they're in contact with their international PEN center and with their PEN centers in other countries, and they always send this information, and they have digest, which they release every week, where you can get this information about the current situation in Belarus. So it's very useful, and they're doing their best in that conditions in which they have to, to live, because I know that the other day the president of Belarusian PEN Center, she was called for the talk with the police, this kind of secret police, or and I guess it was a very unpleasant talk, and who knows what were their threats and what pressure she must have experienced, and the whole organization is experiencing now.
That's really tragic. Tsitsi, do you have a PEN or a similar organization in Zimbabwe that's doing this kind of role?
James, we do have PEN in Zimbabwe, and we have had it for some decades, and then some time ago it disbanded and crumbled when one of the leaders of it was exiled. That was the late Chenjeraiho, the writer from Zimbabwe. And it was dormant for several years. And then a few years ago, I initiated a drive to resuscitate PEN, and I was successful. However, things in Zimbabwe are really complicated, and one has to make sure that one is open to people from across the spectrum of the Zimbabwean community. And when you do that, you obviously get elements of specific tendencies. And so it becomes difficult to continue to operate perhaps in as progressive a manner as people would want to. And anyway, as a result of that, I am no longer a member of PEN, but I am sure that in fact, I know that they continue. Their programs are mainly educational, and I do not think that they really engage in issues around freedom of expression or anything political.
Okay. That is actually very sad, because if it, but Ralph said that it's only a small amount of the PENs around the world that are more interested in this topic. Am I very wrong, Ralph?
No, you are right. You are right. I think it's mostly it's PEN from Europe, PEN America, and PEN Australia. It's more these countries who are very engaged in these problems. So not that much the PEN in countries who have themselves problems with the freedom of expression.
Well, I'm happy to hear that. Volodya, I'll just ask you a little question about Belarusian writing, which because it's not every day we get a chance to hear of somebody who is from Belarusia. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your literary community, your literary scene?
Okay. So Belarus, as a country in modern history, gained its independence in 1991. Before that, Belarus was part of the big Soviet Union, after 1991, so we gained our independence. We returned our traditional flag, our traditional symbols. Belarusian became the first and the only state language, and it was like the Renaissance time for the culture, for everything. Then lots of books were translated. I mean, humanities books on different fields like sociology, anthropology, and so on and so forth. They were translated into the Belarusian language, so it was like a very good start. But then in 1995, that notorious referendum took part, and the year before, this president was elected, who is now still in power for more than 25 years already. And so he decided to take this referendum to change the constitution, to introduce those other symbols which were close to these Soviet types. And he made Russian language the second state language. So, and it's the situation till now. So we have two state languages, which is very an unfavorable situation for the Belarusian language. But if we look at our literature scene, so most writers do write in Belarusian. I mean, if you really, think about, I don't know, maybe I'm talking for myself. Yeah, for me, it has never been a question what language to write, because, Belarusian was the answer. But here and there are people who write in Russian, I mean, for me, I have no problem with them. And even the Nobel Prize winner, Svetlana Alexievich, she also writes in Russian. But nevertheless, she calls herself a Belarusian author. So there are people who also write in Russian, but let's say in percentage, they're not that big. But the problem, like if you write in Belarusian, you immediately identified with opposition. And I should say that we do have the state sector of publishing houses, which are funded by the state. And as you can guess, as a writer who doesn't belong to the official writers union, it's problematic to be published there. And actually, I doubt people would like to. And the other peculiarity in our literary scene is that we have two writers unions. And one is pro-governmental and the other is oppositional. The situation with the publishing is also very sad at the moment, and because most of publishers were independent and who publish contemporary Belarusian literature also just have to survive. And this year, or like last 2 years, they have really been too challenging. First of all, because of the Corona crisis, and the second is due to this political situation now. And to my mind, our publishers, independent small publishing houses, they're really heroes and heroines who continue in spite of all those pressures, because also the publishers were arrested, or they had searches in their offices, their computers were confiscated, and in spite of even this bad additional themes here introduced by a recent political situation. The economic situation is also very unfavorable because, for example, in Belarus, we have a very high taxation for the publishing activity. It's like 20%, which is even in the neighboring Russia, they have only 13%. And you can imagine that, I mean, with such economic situation, it's really kind of survival. I mean, you can't make any profit if you're a private publisher. You just, happy if you make it 0-0. Yeah, if you and very often, yes, and very often publishers invest themselves or from private funds or just the writers themselves. And the big helping hand here is sure international organizations like Goethe Institute or Norwegian Norla or so like, but it works only for translation books again, and sadly enough, yeah.
I'll just follow up. What kind of writing? What kind of stories are they writing? Are Belarusians writing? What kind of fiction are they writing?
I think like everybody else. I mean, we had a very long tradition. I mean, our national literature dates back to the Middle Ages, and so we do have this wonderful tradition, which was interrupted due to the Russian Empire, who constantly tried to conquer us, But today's topics, so mostly about contemporary life. Sure, you can see also these topics like political ones, which maybe are not on the surface so much, but you can feel it anyway. I think it's really one of the up to the standard to any other European literature, and people talk or writers talk about topics which are important or which painful for them. So,
thank you. What about you, Tsitsi? You want to tell us a little about the Zimbabwean literary community, or whatever you can tell us about it?
Yes, well, the Zimbabwean literary community has shrunk, James, in the last couple of decades. About 40 years ago, around the time of independence, Zimbabwe was one of the well-known literary countries on the African continent, and we had a crop of very interesting writers. And that continued for a while and went hand in hand with the education system, which was very good after independence. Writers were writing mainly in 3 languages, Shona, English, and Ndebele, which were all and still are national languages in Zimbabwe. But as the education began to decline, so also the writing began to decline. And as the economy began to decline, we saw more and more people, including writers, leaving the country. So now we see that there's been a shift. Rather than having many of the notable Zimbabwean writers inside the country, we have them outside the country. And this is wonderful in some ways, but it also does mean that the people who are writing in a context where their writing has value are generally not experiencing the current conditions in Zimbabwe. Most of the people who want to write about current conditions in Zimbabwe see themselves having to engage with the political situation in one way or another. For example, Novuyo Chuma, House of Stone is one that comes to mind. A little earlier, Christopher Mlalazi, Running with Mother, which was about the genocide in the south of the country. And so that can be quite dangerous if you are doing that inside Zimbabwe. So really, basically, the amount and the quality of the writing has declined. Another issue is that day-to-day life is just so difficult. people don't have the time and the energy to write. If you have a job, it's nominal, because some of our professionals, for example, our doctors and nurses, our teachers, civil servants, say they do not even earn enough to be able to go to work, to pay for their travel costs to go to work and to go home. So in a situation like that, you're always doing half a dozen other things just to earn a living. What is the government's response to that? Instead of realizing that fundamental changes in the whole system need to be made, the government then goes and says, well, we will lay on buses for certain professions. The teachers will get buses and the nurses will get buses. So there really isn't an engagement that helps Zimbabwe to think of reviving the economy in a way that would enable practitioners in the creative industries and the writers to find an environment that they can produce in. So at the moment, I am rather distressed and discouraged at what I see. I think another problem that we have is something I mentioned earlier, and that is that in order to survive, people then have to engage with the ruling party, ZANU-PF, and become enablers of that system, or else they have to take on other agendas. And so there is no true burgeoning of a Zimbabwean literature. And then the other thing that I find worrisome at this moment, and it has been going on for a long time, is what I call the infantilization of African, including Zimbabwean, creative production. You are only worth being engaged with if you are at an elementary level. So then people want to come in and help you, to teach you to get elementary skills. But there is very little support, whether it's from the state or from any other sources, that will encourage writers at intermediate and late career levels. And I have an example actually to show how that support is so necessary, because in the plastic arts, especially the stone sculpture in Zimbabwe, you have those structures, and also in the other visual arts, you have those structures where there's the entry-level support, there's the mid-career support, and there's the late career support. And we find that Zimbabweans are performing very well in those structures, in those in that sector from within the country. We don't see that Zimbabweans have had to leave. But in terms of literature, we don't have any supportive structures.
Ralph, when we started this conversation, you said that Germany doesn't have any of these kind of problems that we're talking about in Zimbabwe and Ralph. And I'm sure at one point it did have those problems. How did you move to the space you're in now where, you don't have those problems?
No, we don't have these problems in Germany right now. In former times we have had these problems.
So how did you move away from that? Well, what were the steps that were taken to move towards where you are now, so that maybe we can learn from you wherever we might be?
Oh, it was a long process, I think. A process about up to now more than 70 years since the end of the Second World War. So it was a really long way to the democracy, to get away from all those thinking about Nazi thinking. We still have this in Germany. There are still some people on the very right side, but mostly I think we have lots of democratic processes in Germany, and so we can help perhaps other countries. So one thing so we look back in our history, and this then we know that we have the German literature and the exile in the 1930s. So Thomas Mann, Leon Feuchtwanger, they lived in America, and so we now tried something to help threatened authors from other countries. So we have in Germany this Writers in Exile program you perhaps have heard since the late 1990s. And so we try to give other authors from countries the possibility to live safe in Germany. And so the authors can also work in Germany and write. So we provide our scholars with a furnished apartment, a monthly stipend and health insurance for 1 or 2, but no longer than 3 years. And during these times, we protect and advise our refugee colleagues. So while we give them a short briefer or to recover from some of the trauma in their countries, we encourage them to continue their work as writers as soon as possible. And the circle of the current scholarship holders includes the Turkish writer Asli Erdogan, for example, and also now Volha, who can certainly tell us perhaps her view on our program in a few months better than now. Also, our former scholarship holders include such renowned writers as Svetlana Alexievich, who also comes from Belarus and was later awarded by a Nobel Prize of Literature. And so, depending on their country's origin, the authors may speak a little English or French, and however, many only speak the native tongue. So we encourage them to start learning the German language as quickly as possible. At the end of the 3 years, the writers in exile should be able to find their way around in this country, still foreign to them. Many of the scholars wrestle hard with the question whether they should apply for asylum. Most of them want to return home just as soon as the conditions have settled down in their home countries. And so we often, and during these years, we find new friends from all over the world who we dine with, who make us laugh and criticize us, and they bring us kind of the world into our homes and allow us to share in what we might have seemed strange to us before. So I think this program, there are now at the moment about 10 scholarships in Germany. It's a kind of it's a small number of possible writers worldwide, but every single life and destiny counts.
I really love what you're doing with the writers from other parts of the world. But what about the writers who are disadvantaged in Germany, like Afro-Germans or the Roma people? Do you have programs, to support them?
So the German PEN had not really have directly programs, but we for them. But normally we try to involve them in our work as it's possible, and perhaps or we engage us if they are harassment against Roma people or colored people. So we tell in different ways that we are against such harassment.
Oh, okay. So German PEN doesn't have any programs, but you are just against harassment.
So something like that. We have no special programs for colored people in Germany or something like that. That doesn't exist.
Oh, okay. That is interesting. Let's move to Tsitsi. I mean, I'm going to ask you because you did spend a time in jail. Well, what was it, a night? Are we going to get a Ngugi wa Thiong'o or a memoir or something like that from you?
From my time in Germany, I don't know.
You know, in your time in jail.
From my time, it was one night, and it was actually one of the best ways to spend a time in jail because there were other people who had been arrested, and so we were together. I got to know people I wouldn't otherwise have got to know. I wouldn't like to spend enough time in a Zimbabwean jail to write a memoir about it. What I can say is that I'm writing a young adult dystopian fiction at the moment, and I can now describe some things better. Although it's not a memoir, I can describe some things that I had written before in a better and more immediate manner now.
Thank you. What about you, Volya? Are we seeing any art from your self-exile?
I think, yeah, my poetry, or because I think writer, every poet, when he or she writes, the conditions where he or she lives, it's there in his or her work. Yeah, but I can say that, for example, this a recent book, which is called Camel Travel. It was written, yeah, Ralph has it in German. It describes the childhood of a girl who spent her childhood at the end of the Soviet times and beginning of independence. So it's a kind of autobiography. And I try to understand with that book why my generation, which is today the most active part of the country, why we are like we are, and maybe also to possibly to see the reasons, to have a look at not only at the the political situation, or how the country was from this, let's say, adult point of view, but from a child's point of view, because I really think that children, this stage, our childhood, is very important for every person, and it's important for the countries, for the nations, if we speak about nations as phenomena. And I think your question, James, to Ralph about how German society managed to go that way, and I think it's also due to the importance of what they have in German society, this attention to literature and attention to culture as a phenomenon, like that it is important, and we have to support it. We have to give finance there, because what I have seen recently, not only in Belarus but also in other countries, there is this sad tendency. People think that we don't need books, we don't need poetry. Who reads poetry today? Humanities, who cares about this philosophy and sociology? Why? If you look at the agenda or curriculum in universities, most of them cut down on this block on humanities, and they try to introduce MBAs, how to sell things, and they turn universities into this, I don't know, marketplace or whatever, and you have to sell yourself. I think this is a very dangerous path, and Germany knows very well that path. My country also, because the communists we live under for so many years, also, it was a kind of totalitarian regime. And I think that this empathy which you bring up with literature, with poetry, this is some kind of vaccine to this all atrocities and to all those bad things, fascism, and the other things which can happen to our people, to the populations, to the countries. So that's why education and started from the very early age, given this idea to children is very important. And so in my book, I try just to show how it can be traumatic when you treat a child in this totalitarian thing like this, when we had this lack of emotions, lack of everyday stuff. But the most terrible for me, for example, was this lack of emotions. Then when you were not allowed to cry, you were not allowed to think about yourself, because the collective, the collective thing, the society, like this, you have to do everything for them, but nothing for yourself. So we had this kind of extreme, in my country. And I try to show in my novel maybe how traumatic it can be, so that other generations maybe don't repeat this.
Oh, I think James is frozen.
Yes.
I'm sorry if it was too long.
No,
I'm
it's,
sure.
no, Titi, please finish the thought.
No, I was just saying that I'm sure that it wasn't Bolia's response that caused the freezing. That's all.
No, it's not. I have to ask you, Ralph. You're holding up the book. Is Germany pen? Does it have anything to do with the book, or are you just a friend?
I don't get them again, please.
No.
No,
you
he
have the book.
just showed my book because he just happened
So,
to have it.
the book, no, I've just read her book to get informed about her, and I also read the book from Tsitsi. So they are both translated in Germany, those books, and I'm just informed you, and I was interested what they are writing, what kind of literature. So that's the reason the books lay by my side here.
Okay, I have to ask the one by Tsitsi. Which one is that? Like, because I don't know that cover.
It's the new one from Orlando. I think it appeared last year because it was published by Rororo first, and now Orlando has got the rights to this, and I think they will also be publishing This Mournable Body later this year.
Is this Novus Conditions?
That's Novus Conditions.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm. So, do you by any chance support the writers who are in exile producing the art that you're supporting, Ralph?
Yes, we try if the writers are in our exile program, we try to find also publishing houses or translators for them, so that they have the possibility to be translated also in Germany, and so that they can write their books, and so we can see and have an idea what kind of writing, what their writing is like.
So, do you mind giving us a few names of some of the people you supported to produce art?
Yes, it's perhaps it's Asli. No, Asli Erdogan. It was Asli Erdogan. I've told you. There is also Şevval Zenyur Arinli, another Turkish writer. They have translated a book from her. It's a kind of a dialogue with Teresa Mora. So a very famous author in Europe or Germany. And so they are writing letters to each other about their situation. And we are published this book. So we are also trying to find publishing houses for the authors. That's very important for them. And it's not easy also normally for German writers to find a publishing house. So I think this help is very important for them.
Voldia, when I was going through your bio, I noticed that you translate between very many languages. Is this like, how does this come about? Because I noticed that was like 5 or 6 languages.
Yeah, just because I'm a linguist. This is my profession and my passion. I like to learn foreign languages, and then this is the best way to connect. And I visited a number of festivals, and very often when you go for a festival and you meet nice people, I want to immediately translate their poems, and then I start to learn the language.
Okay, so at this point, I'm going to ask you a question about what is forthcoming from you. Maybe we can start with UTC. Are there any projects that are forthcoming from you that we need to be, checking out for, or that we need to be aware of, that you'd like us to know about?
Yeah, well, I don't write quickly because just trying to stay afloat in Zimbabwe takes up most of my time and most of my energy. And I have to just kind of squeeze out the time for engaging with literature. And also the situation in Zimbabwe is so demanding. You can't go one day without seeing something on the street. For example, there was somebody was killed in close to my neighborhood. Why was this person killed? Because the grass by the road, which is in fact council property, had not been cut. So you couldn't see round the corner, because the council isn't doing its job. So these kinds of things are happening all the time, and one then, or at least I have the feeling that I have to do something. So I'm in several groups that are trying to engage with the situation in Zimbabwe as well, which takes up, for me, some of the same kind of energy that I would use, in creating a fictitious world. I'm using it in trying to create a real world.
Mhm.
So writing is very slow for me. But having said that, I mentioned earlier that I'm writing a young adult fiction, dystopian fiction, speculative. And I just felt that speculative universes are very attractive to young people because they're beginning to form their ideas about the world, but they also want to know about how the world might be, not only how the world is now. And also, I wanted to write a kind of an explanation, if you like, of the situation that we see in Zimbabwe today, because many, if not most, African youth today are growing up in that situation. And then people suddenly expect the youth to be this great revolutionary force. And how on earth can one expect that from a youth in impoverished countries who have virtually no agency, no recourse, and no resources? So these are some of the things that I wanted to engage with in this book. And also to maybe shed a light onto different ways of looking at the world, different cosmologies. We don't have to accept the kind of market-driven universe that Volya was talking about, where everybody has to market themselves and cut the next person's throat in order to be at the top. I was just trying to see whether I could create a different cosmology that might give young people from my part of the world more room to maneuver and consider themselves as human beings who have competences in the 21st century. So it's called Sai and the Great Ancestor of Fire, because the metaphysical forces come from the ancestors.
Thank you, Cici. What about you, Volya? Do we expect any new projects that you want us to check out that we need to be looking out for?
Yeah,
but
because
sorry, it's not to look out for now. It's going to take some time.
No, no problem.
yeah, I'm also like maybe not the fast writer, especially for prose, but I was really lucky these last 2 years because I could really concentrate on my writing, and I understand totally what Cici was talking about, because when you, for example, live in Belarus, and I think even in Germany, and you're sure in Germany it's better, but to be a full-time writer in Belarus is just impossible because you will starve. You cannot earn. I mean, and if you're a poet, that's even worse. In Germany, you have this wonderful system of like, if you have a reading, you get paid. If you have a talk, you get paid. So in Belarus, we don't have nothing of this. Yeah. So that's why we also, I mean, you have to work somewhere else to earn your living, and then your extra time you just write when you have this minute or two. But for me now it's really, as I said, a big clock, and I concentrate on my writing. And I managed to finish my next novel, which is now getting ready to be published in Belarus. Hopefully it will happen. And I continue working with poems all the time. And I'm preparing 2 books of poetry, one in Belarusian and the other in German, because I started to write in German a little bit. So hopefully also it will see the world. Yeah. And the translations also, because at the moment I'm working for the anthology, which is sponsored by International Youth Library here in Munich. It's one of the, I think, biggest, if I'm not mistaken, youth libraries. And I'm making my research collecting unrhymed or non-rhymed poetry for children. And I want to, to shatter this canon a little bit that poems for children can be also non-rhymed and they can be wonderful, beautiful, and very deep in meaning. So hopefully this project also will see the world.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Emmanuel Sigauko, logging on Facebook. He's commenting. He wonders too, Sisi, what it means to be a youth in contemporary Zimbabwe. I'm sure we all wonder. Ralph, perhaps you can wrap it up. Have you completely abandoned your writing profession and now are in pen, or are we seeing anything in writing from you?
So at the moment, to write travel books is a little complicated and difficult because of Corona, based at your hometown in the kind of way. But I'm also writing a third crime who is settled in the Provence and who will be published next spring.
Excellent, excellent. I'd like to say thank you so much, Tsitsi, Volia, and Ralph for joining me on the live stream, and everybody who joined us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. We'll wrap it up here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Bye.